I'm here recording the intro for this latest video that I want to put up to stress the point that all your mainstream facts for the most part are lies, half-truths. To the curveballers out there that I refer to as the people believing in the ball earth. The whole reason for my channel was to wake up a curveballer cousin of mine. Spoke to him today. He couldn't get past 2 minutes of my latest part of NASA lies, I guess. It was posted in this folder. Your cognitive dissonance has to be confronted by you, the viewer, or the learner, the seeker, in order for you to come to new truths, new deeper understandings of your reality. You have to be willing to think it possible. If you can't conceive the notion of it being possible reality, then you're no better than the people that Paul is speaking to here in the Bible. They're fooled to not marry, to not eat certain foods, false claims. You got to question everything, truth seeker, curveballer. Otherwise, you're going to operate out of an arrogance of ignorance. I'm just trying to wake you up before you burn up. Perhaps with this new insight from a different perspective, from science fiction point of view. A man like Philip K. Dick, who wrote Minority Report, all these movies, Adjustment Bureau, all these ideas of modern day reality, artificial intelligence, Blade Runner. So take it from his perspective if you don't want to hear it from me. But in the next 5 years, I would imagine all these points of knowledge will become overwhelming. What are you going to say when I stare at the solar eclipse in Cleveland and I don't go blind? I have no eye problem at all. What will you say then? You got to question these truths you've been told. In his undelivered speech, How to Build a Universe That Doesn't Fall Apart 2 Days Later, Dick recounts how he described an incident in the end of the book to an Episcopalian priest. The priest noted its striking similarity to a scene in the book of Acts in the Bible. In Dick's book, the police chief, Felix Buckman, meets a black stranger at an all-night gas station, with whom he uncharacteristically makes an emotional connection. After handing the stranger a drawing of a heart pierced by an arrow, Buckman flies away, but he quickly returns and hugs the stranger, after which he strike up a friendly conversation. In the book of Acts, the disciple Philip meets an Ethiopian eunuch sitting on a chariot, to whom he explains a passage from the book of Isaiah, and then converts him to Christianity. Dick further notes, the 8 years after writing the book, he himself uncharacteristically came to the aid of a black stranger who'd run out of gas. After giving the man some money and then driving away, he returned to help the man reach a gas station. Dick was struck by the similarity between the incident and that described in the book, approaching a black stranger and returning again. Dick also recounts an unusual dream experience he had while writing the book, and how he felt compelled to get it into the text of the novel. Years later, in retrospect of the biblical coincidences he experienced following the publication of the novel, he came to interpret his dream as the key to understanding the real meaning of the story, stating, "Deciphered, my novel tells a quite different story from the surface story. The real story is simply this: the return of Christ, now king rather than serving servant, judge rather than victim of unfair judgment. Everything is reversed. The core message of my novel, without my knowing it, was to warn the powerful, you will shortly be judged and condemned."
people claim to remember past lives. I claim to remember a different, very different present life. I know of no one who has ever made this claim before, but I rather suspect that my experience is not unique. What perhaps is unique is the fact that I am willing to talk about it. We are living in a computer-programmed reality, and the only clue we have to it is when some variable is changed and some alteration in our reality occurs. We would have the overwhelming impression that we were reliving the present, déjà vu, perhaps in precisely the same way, hearing the same words, saying the same words. I submit that these impressions are valid and significant, and I will even say this: such an impression is a clue that at some past time point a variable was changed, reprogrammed as it were, and that because of this an alternative world branched off.
One, I'm a scientist, but today science is the religion of the West. It's the scientists who tell us what we should believe and what we shouldn't. It's the scientists that tell us what is true and what is false. So basically they take the place of the priests of olden times. So that's one reason I write my book in terms of science. But the second is that if you are going to have a major impact on society as far as helping them understand how reality works, what their point and purpose is in this life, and so on, then first you need to get the high priests of our culture to agree with you.
The subject of this speech is a topic which has been discovered recently and which may not exist at all. I may be talking about something that does not exist. Therefore, I'm free to say everything or nothing. I, in my stories and novels, often write about counterfeit worlds, semi-real worlds, as well as deranged private worlds, inhabited often by just one person, while meantime the other characters either remain in their own worlds throughout or are somehow drawn into one of the peculiar ones. This theme occurs in the corpus of my 27 years of writing. At no time did I have a theoretical or conscious explanation for my preoccupation with these pluriform pseudo-worlds, but now I think I understand. What I was sensing was the manifold of partially actualized realities lying tangent to what evidently is the most actualized one, the one which the majority of us, by consensus gentium, agree on. Later that day, back home again, but still deeply under the influence of the sodium pentothal, I had a short, acute flash of recovered memory. Then, in mid-March, a month later, the total body of memories, intact and entire, began to return. You are free to believe me or to disbelieve, but please take my word on it that I am not joking. This is very serious, a matter of importance. At that time, I had no idea what I was seeing. It resembled nothing that I had ever heard described. It resembled plasmic energy. It had colors. It moved fast. It collected and then dispersed. But what it was, what he was, I am not sure even now. In other words, it's a common theme in my writing that a dark-haired girl shows up at the door of the protagonist and tells him that his world is delusional, that there's something false about it. Well, this did finally happen to me. I even knew that her hair would be black. I had an actual complete sense of what she would look like and what she would say. She did appear. She was a total stranger, and she did inform me of this fact, that some of my fictional works were in a literal sense true. I wrote out these dreams in novel after novel, story after story. To name two in which this prior ugly present obtained most clearly, I cite The Man in the High Castle and my 1974 novel about the U.S. as a police state, called Flow My Tears, the Policeman Said.
Do you feel that any of your books are, in any sense, warnings against this? I mean, to what extent are you commenting on this, and to what extent are you writing it with a specific idea of getting a reaction from the reader? In other words, to what extent are you aware of the reader at all when you write?
Oh, I'm very conscious of the reader. I mean, I am saying to the reader, the greatest menace that faces the human being in the 20th century is the coming into existence in our times of the totalitarian state, which can take many forms. It can take the form of, doesn't have to take the form of right-wing fascism. It can take the form of left-wing fascism. It can take the form of psychological movements. It can take the form of religious movements. I mean, it can be est, or it can be the Hare Krishna people. It can be Synanon, drug rehabilitation places. It can be powerful people, manipulative people. It can be in a relationship where you're in a relationship with someone who is more powerful than you psychologically. And essentially, I'm pleading the cause of those people who are not strong. I mean, I identify myself as essentially a weak person, a person who succumbs to authority and can only fight a rearguard defensive action against it, essentially a losing battle against it. That I mean, if I were a strong person psychologically, I would not feel this as such a menace. Probably, I mean, this is probably an indication of my own vulnerability to the fragility of my own ego, my own self-system. This one psychiatrist who insisted that I was an alcoholic bullied me and bullied me and bullied me. And instead of fighting back, I just simply stopped going to it. Now it would have been much better if I had confronted him head on. It would have been a sign of strength. It was not a sign of strength for me to stop going. It was a chicken shit thing to do, to just stop going. And I think, you know, that I can speak for the people who are not powerfully armored against authoritarian authority figures and authoritarian groups and movements, states, blocks, and so on. That I speak for all the people who get victimized because they are essentially weak and do not have tactics of direct defense, and who are really ripped off psychologically. And this is one reason why my protagonists are essentially what's called anti-heroes. They're almost losers in a way, you know, and yet, you know, I try to equip them with certain qualities by which they can survive. But I'm equipping people to survive who are not in charge of the situation. I mean, they're people who are essentially victims of the situation and victims through weakness, not victims through the malice of other people, victims through their own weakness. And a corollary on this is that I don't want to see them develop counter-aggressive tactics where they essentially become exploitive and manipulative and develop, like I took some assertion training, and, you know, we were taught tactics of assertion. And these were just counter-fascist tactics. Absolutely. I mean, you just, all you did was you learned techniques by which you bullied other people. And so you then sallied forth into the world as another bully, and it was bully against bully. So it became a jungle where it was just whoever possessed the technique which was the most ruthless, the most selfish, the most cruel, the most heartless. I mean, we were taught to turn off our feelings. We were taught to strike out, you know, to be impervious to other people's needs. And I object to that version.
The experience.
It invaded my mind and assumed control of my motor centers and did my acting and thinking for me.
But you had your own consciousness there as well.
Yeah, but I was a spectator to it.
Oh.
And it first of all, it set about healing me physically, and my little 4-year-old boy, had a undiagnosed birth defect. And this mind, whose identity was totally obscure to me, I even thought it might have been Elijah, it might have been the Holy Spirit. I thought of everything. All I can say is I don't know. Was that it was equipped with tremendous technical knowledge, engineering knowledge, medical knowledge, cosmological knowledge, philosophical knowledge. The first thing that it informed me was to be very wary of heavy metals. And I've even thought that it was one of the great Illuminati of history, one of the great Rosicrucians, like it might have been Paracelsus. I thought for a long time that it might have been Paracelsus. I thought it might be a previous incarnation of myself that had broken through. It had memories dating back over 2,000 years. It spoke Greek. It spoke Hebrew. It spoke Sanskrit. There wasn't anything that it didn't seem to know. It immediately set about putting my affairs in order. It fired my agent. It fired my publisher. It was very practical. It decided that the apartment had not been vacuumed adequately and not recently enough. It decided that I should stop drinking wine entirely because it was a sediment, and it turned out I had abundance of uric acid in my system, and switched me to beer. It made elementary mistakes. It kept calling the dog he and the cat she, which annoyed my wife, since I knew and she knew that the dog was a female and the cat was a male. It kept calling her ma'am, and it would lapse into what turned out to be Koine Greek when it would fall into a contemplative state. She recognized it as Koine Greek because she'd taken some Attic Greek in school. I didn't even recognize it as a language. I thought it was just nonsense. It was very intelligent and had a firm and shrewd grasp of business matters. It remargined my typewriter's margining. I even thought it might have been the soul of my friend Jim Pike come back from the dead. And I don't exclude the possibility either, Charles. I'm not willing to exclude the possibility that Jim Pike came back to me as his son Jimmy came back to him, because it had a tremendous interest in early Christian theology and in Zoroastrianism, which Jim Pike had confessed to me once he believed was probably the true religion. It was very versed in Zoroastrianism and knew a great deal about the Essenes and the therapeutic.
How did your wife perceive all this? Did you tell her what was going on?
Oh yes, we discussed it. She was impressed by the fact that because of the tremendous pressure that it put on people in my business, that I made quite a lot of money very rapidly. We began to get checks in for thousands of dollars, money that was owed me, that this mind was conscious existed in New York and had never been coughed up. It also wrote a letter to the Roman Catholic Church, informing the Roman Catholic Church that my writing contained allusions to the New Testament, which were to edify the Roman Catholic Church that a miracle had occurred, and that it was very busy and active. Does this interest you?
How could it not?
Okay. It had one overweening concern. This was in March of 1974. It informed me that a group of conspirators had murdered the Kennedys, Dr. King, and Bishop Pike. That it, the mind that had taken me over, had seen the conspirators. The mind then graphically represented itself as the Cumaean Sibyl.
What's the what?
The Sibyl of Cumae.
Oh, my logical knowledge is not very.
Well, the command Sibyl was the Roman equivalent of the Delphic Sibyl of Greece. The command Sibyl advised the Roman Republic when it was in danger. She had the so-called Sibylline books, which were consulted by the Roman Republic. Well, now I've let it out of the bag, haven't I? I said she. It was female. She was female. She had the Sibylline books. She showed me the Sibylline books. She said the Republic was in danger. She meant the American Republic. She said that once again the Empire threatened to take over. She was there to see that the Empire was destroyed. I shouldn't be saying this. This is really stupid of me, Charles. I shouldn't be talking about
I'll cut out anything that you want me to say.
No, I don't approve of that. I mean, if I'm indiscreet enough to say it, I don't necessarily want to censor it.
Well, wait a minute. I don't see it that way. I see it as sometimes you need to think carefully as to what you want to make public and what you don't. And you can't think carefully at the same time that you're talking.
Well, that's true. That's true.
So
Well, okay, most of it's invalid anyway. She said that the oscillation between the Republic and the Empire was a constant in history. She caused me to see periods in history in which the Empire had been defeated. It took me 5 years to identify one of those periods. It turned out to be the War of the Spanish Lowlands. It turned out to be the beginning of the 17th century, in which the Dutch cities broke off from the Holy Roman Empire. She said that that was the situation now in the United States in '74, that the Republic was turning into an empire. And she said, and they shall be destroyed, for they are murderers. She then dictated a series of letters to Charles Wiggins. Charles Wiggins was on the House Judiciary Committee sitting in on the decision as to whether to impeach President Nixon. She said to inform, she would dictate the letters. She dictated a series of letters to Congressman Wiggins. They dealt with constitutional law. I didn't understand the letters, because they dealt with constitutional law, and I know nothing about constitutional law. Later I found out that Congressman Wiggins is such an authority on constitutional law that he was suggested as a possibility for the Supreme Court. He came from Fullerton, which is where I was living, and it was his practice to read every letter that came from Fullerton and to answer it. She revealed to me that she had moved me to Fullerton from Canada so that I could write to Charles Wiggins on the Judiciary Committee while they were sitting in judgment on whether they should vote out a bill of impeachment on President Nixon. She dictated a series of letters informing Congressman Wiggins that he had no loyalty to the President of the United States because the President had violated his oath of office, which was that he would uphold the Constitution of the United States. He having failed to do so, Charles Wiggins did not owe the President any loyalty, citing historical examples. Congressman Wiggins answered each letter in detail, and then she sent the final letter. The letter contained the information of the Nixon transcripts were forgeries. They did not correspond to the tapes, and if the tapes were released, it would show that the transcripts were forgeries. That led
Novelist Philip K. Dick suggested that time on Earth has stopped in the year 50 AD, and he gives concrete reasons for his theory in his breathtaking essay, How to Build a Universe That Doesn't Fall Apart 2 Days Later, in I Hope I Shall Arrive Soon. In short, he believes that our world today is not taking place in the 21st century, and we are deceived and live in a counterfeit reality lodged in a space-time pocket in 50 AD. He writes, My theory is this: time is not real. Despite all the change we see, a specific permanent landscape underlies the world of change, and this invisible underlying landscape is that of the Bible. It, specifically, is the period immediately following the death and resurrection of Christ. It is, in other words, the time period of the book of Acts. There is internal evidence that another reality, an unchanging one, exactly as Parmenides and Plato suspected, underlies the visible phenomenal world of change, and we can cut through to it. Thousands of years pass, but the world of the Bible is concealed beneath it, still there and still real. To Dick, the Bible is a literally real but veiled landscape, never changing but usually hidden from our sight. Dick cites numerous coincidences in his life that plunged him back to the time period of the book of Acts. His novels contain surprising fragments of the Bible that he had never read at the time of his own writing. When a young Christian woman wearing a shining goldfish necklace appears at his doorway with medicine for his pain, it all becomes clear to him. The synchronicities are too much. Although Dick realizes that modern scientists would scoff at his seemingly insane assertions, he promotes his odd worldview as a useful metaphor for the difficulties humans have when trying to comprehend reality. Pre-Socratic Milesian Greek philosopher Heraclitus wrote, "The nature of things is in the habit of concealing itself." Dick believes that the cosmos is not as it appears to be, and what it probably is, at its deepest level, is exactly that which the human being is at his deepest level, call it mind or soul. It is something unitary which lives and thinks, and only appears to be plural and material. According to Dick, God and the universe were both that which thought, and the thing it thought, thinker and thought together. The universe, then, is thinker and thought, and since we are part of it, we as humans are, in the final analysis, thoughts of and thinkers of those thoughts.